So today I have on a very special guest. I am so excited. I feel like I already know her because I've been listening to her podcast for the last few days to get prepared. Her name is Lestranda. Did I say that right? Just Lestrandra, but you can call her Les. And she has a podcast that you've probably heard of before because it's amazing. And it's called the Balanced Black Girl Podcast. It's a platform dedicated to promoting health, wellness, and personal development for Black women. With a background in fitness and wellness, Les combines her expertise and passion to create a supportive community that encourages women to prioritize their well-being. And don't we all need that? Through her podcast, she features insightful conversations with experts and thought leaders, providing practical advice and inspiration for living a balanced life. Okay, I need some tips on how to live a balanced life. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. It's so nice to see somebody else who's doing what I'm doing and crushing it. And I'm just so inspired. Like, you recently made a big move from LA to New York, and you've been doing this podcast for years, right? And tell me, what's it like to have that kind of freedom? Like, you're an entrepreneur, you can just move wherever you want, and you have your own show. Is it amazing or is it scary?
Both. I mean, I recently was cleaning out my apartment and I found an old journal of mine from a few years ago where I was writing about my ideal day and how I wish my life looked. And I started getting teary because I was like, wow, that's normal for me now. A few years ago, I was living in LA. My life was very different. I was still working in corporate. I was still growing the podcast. And I used to just dream of having days and flexibility like I have now. So it's something that I definitely don't take for granted.
That's so interesting. I mean, people are probably out there listening being like, what are you talking about, Aurora? You have the same kind of situation. But I really don't. I have 2 kids. I'm trapped in LA. It's where I want to be trapped because I love where I live. But when you have kids, the freedom and flexibility does not stay like it used to when you were young. And I didn't have a job like this when I didn't have kids. So I look at somebody like you and I'm like, wow, that life seems pretty sweet. You just can do anything you want. But I feel like if I was in your shoes, I might feel a little ungrounded because you have so many possibilities. You can do anything you want.
Right. And I think it's why I'm grateful to be in this position now in my 30s, because I think if I was in my 20s and I had that much flexibility and it was that loosey-goosey, I would have been a little all over the place.
Right.
Versus now, being a little older, having better discernment, just making better decisions, I can use that flexibility better.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so you were in corporate before you went off on your own. I know there's a lot of people listening who are in situations, jobs that they feel maybe are confining, that would love to do something more flexible. How were you able to make that leap?
It was a long time. It was a long time coming. I started creating content in 2014, and I was able to truly go full-time in 2023. So it was not a quick process. It took a lot of trial. It took a lot of error. But a lot of it was me looking at, okay, what are my blocks? What are the things that are holding me back? What are the things that I feel like I can't comfortably take the leap and have? So for a lot of it, it was like I had a lot of student loans and I didn't feel comfortable going full time when I had a bunch of debt, or if I didn't necessarily have like retirement savings, or if I just had these things that I felt like were obstacles. I started focusing heavily on the solutions so that those things were no longer an issue. And then I felt comfortable taking the leap.
Okay. So you were able to like pay off your student loans and start, saving for retirement and all that. And then you took the leap after that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Those are pretty daunting to a lot of people because it sounds like you were able to pay off your loans pretty quickly. I don't think a lot of people could pay off their student loans in 10 years. I mean, a lot of people can't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I was super grateful for that experience. And there was even some times in there where I would get really discouraged or I felt like, oh, what's the point? But then I realized the time is going to pass anyway. Do I want to still be in the same position 10 years from now? Or 10 years from now, do I want to be doing what it is I really wanted to do? And so I had those conversations with myself a while back, and with a little focus and also a lot of luck.
Yeah.
It worked out.
See, I love that you mentioned luck because it is true. I know everybody says you make your own luck, and I think you do, but you have to hand it off to some of the ways that you got to where you are. Like everyone's always saying to me like, oh, if it wasn't for your sister, you wouldn't be X, Y, and Z. Yeah, that's true. She gave me a leg up because she already had a platform. But you know what? Like she got her platform through this person, but like everybody has a trail of people to thank for the serendipitous ways that we've come together in different relationships that have given us a leg up in one way or the other. So to say like we've done anything on our own is actually, I don't know. I think it's giving yourself a little too much credit, right?
Yeah. I mean, people always say, it takes a village to raise a child, but I think as adults, we need villages too.
For
And
sure.
all of us
I need a
have
village.
some sort of web of people that have helped us get where we are.
Yeah. 100%. So what kind of corporate work did you do? And does it have anything to do with your podcast now?
Kind of.
Okay.
So when I first started in corporate world, I did finance, which feels like a lifetime ago.
That feels like really hard and important. I don't think I would ever want to be in finance.
What's so funny is that it wasn't at all. It was actually super boring.
Yeah.
A lot of it is very fake. Like it's fake numbers in a spreadsheet.
I imagine lots of spreadsheets. That scares me.
Yeah. And it's all totally fake. And I remember sitting at like my corporate job after I graduated from college being like, why are people acting like we are curing world peace with these fake numbers? Oh my gosh.
Like, wait, what do you mean fake?
We're just like forecasting. We're guessing. We're making estimates of things. But like, is it going to be true? Is it going to cost more? Is it going to cost less? Like, I don't know. It's all guessing.
You're just covering people's asses. Like, yeah I feel that.
Yeah. And so a lot of it felt very, very fake. And I wanted to do something more creative. And so that was what led me to fitness blogging. So that was how I started in content back in 2014. And through that, I started gaining a lot of helpful skills, writing, editing, social media.
Mm-hmm.
So I did make a pivot from more of the finance type of jobs into more communications and marketing from the content that I was creating, kind of qualified me for marketing roles.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time creating content on the side and then also doing content marketing in corporate. So it was like the two areas kind of fed one another.
Interesting. So you're kind of self-taught. It's interesting. I feel like that's the way it always happens. Something is born out of a true passion, and then you kind of have to teach yourself. And from that, you find that you actually are qualified for a job like marketing or a job like. I think sometimes I'm like, what if Instagram or social media fell off the face of the earth and my podcast went to shit? These are real fears because I have kids. Like, I need to make sure that I'm able to find a way to make money. And I do have a master's degree in teaching. I was a behavior analyst for a while, but I just know I'll never go back to those jobs after experiencing the ability to make money on my own time. So, but I do really have to consider that there might be a time when I can't make money from brand deals. And what am I going to do then? But I could run someone else's social media, or maybe if this is a world where social media doesn't exist, I have learned so many skills, right? Like video editing and marketing and advertising and just the whole, I feel like influencer is the dirtiest word nowadays. It's like if you're called an influencer, it's almost an insult. But an influencer is more than just, I prefer the term like digital entrepreneur.
It's true. Well, and I think the only reason why influencer feels like a dirty word or people look down on it is because it's a women-dominated industry. I think if men were as successul at being influencers, people would take the job way more seriously.
That is so interesting. And I have never thought about that. And now I'm infuriated.
Right.
Like, it's so true.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's funny. I remember the account Influencers in the Wild, and it is like it's true. There is a ridiculousness to some of the things of like we get a beautiful meal, like no one can touch it until we get our photo, or you see people like the wingmen who are like down on the ground taking a picture for their girlfriend. Yes, it can be silly, like the world that we're living in, but I think about like the war that like all the wars that are going on in the world and from social media, like how we're able to see, like get an inside scoop of what's actually happening in these places where it's not, where they don't have free press, and what a gift that is. Like with great power comes great responsibility, right? Like it's a double-edged sword, I believe, at least. So I'm proud to be an influencer, digital entrepreneur, I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, back to you. Let's talk a little bit about what you talk about on your podcast and what's your favorite thing to share with the world? What gift do you think you can bring from your podcast or you're bringing from your podcast?
I think wellness conversations for a really long time were super one-sided, especially for those of us who are on social media creating content in the 2010s. Wellness was very much about smoothie bowls and like yoga poses on the beach, and it looked one way. And I think something that my show has done well is it's opened up the conversation of wellness to include a lot of other facets. Like how we navigate our careers impacts our wellness. Our money impacts our wellness. Our friendships impact our wellness. And so being able to have those conversations openly and honestly, I think is a good thing.
100%. That's so funny that we never really considered friendships as wellness or our social life as wellness when you look at these blue zone parts of the world, and it's like the people who are living the longest are the people who are in community.
Exactly.
And who are feeling like they're a part of something. So that's what I've been trying to also cultivate myself. It is hard in a digital age, I think, where we're all communicating just through our phones all day. It's like kind of takes off the need to see people in person sometimes.
It can. I mean, I also too think, and maybe you feel the same way, because social media and being online is part of our job, there's so much about my life that even my best friend watching wouldn't know just from watching my Instagram. Like we need to call each other and set up time to actually talk about what's going on, because it's like work for us.
Of course.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, that's something I've kind of been struggling with, is the world seeing a very small snippet of my life through the lens of either somebody I'm dating or one of my sisters or something. And then that becomes my entire personality to the world. And it's like, you can defend yourself till the cows come home, but people decide what they want to believe.
Exactly.
And it can be such a taxing, like just this week, really, it's been so taxing with that feeling like I have to defend myself, which I don't know. That's a conversation for another time, I guess. But on that note, how do you deal with social media and just people expecting things from you and needing to be a personality? How do you deal with that? How do you balance it?
It's hard. It's really hard. I mean, my approach to social media has always been to go deep, not wide. So there are very specific things that I go super deep in talking to my audience about. I will go really deep in talking to them about my career or about my wellness or body image or things of that nature. But I don't necessarily go wide where they know everything. Like, my audience doesn't really know anything about my family. They don't really know anything.
I know you're the oldest sister.
I am the oldest daughter, because that is like
or do you have brothers or sisters?
I have a younger brother.
Oh, one younger
so
brother.
Older. Yeah, okay. I'm the oldest child, firstborn daughter. And I have very big like firstborn daughter energy, so I can't really like hide that. But they don't really know anything about like the ins and outs or dynamics of my family beyond that.
Is that intentional?
Yeah, because they didn't really sign up for that. You know, they didn't sign up to like have all their business dragged across the internet.
Your family.
Yeah,
that's true.
Or even like my friends who are, you know, not in this space, or romantic partners. Like my audience doesn't know anything really about any of those things. But because I go so deep in the areas that I deem like I'm willing to talk about, they almost don't know the difference.
Interesting. So they think they're getting the real inside scoop. They're not getting the tea, but they're getting the inside scoop in a different way.
They're getting the inside scoop about like 3 things.
Yeah. That's
but all the other things, not at all.
Right. Okay. I like that. So are you single? Are you dating?
I am single.
And and is that something that you talk about on your podcast, or do you keep it?
Kind of.
Okay.
I mean, people know that I'm single. I don't necessarily go on my podcast and be like, last week I went on a date and here's what happened.
Yeah.
Just because I also, similar to my family, like these guys don't sign up to have their business dragged across the internet. Most of them, I don't really have nice things to say, so I choose to keep it to myself.
Yeah. I keep it I keep them anonymous.
Yeah.
But I do share what happens on dates. But my podcast is about dating. Yours is about balance. And I think I need to learn something from you about maybe saying a little less, because it turns out that some of these people are, you know, not as anonymous as you can't keep the anonymity all the time.
No, it's very...
especially if they have paparazzi following them around. Which
right. It's very easy to find out who people are, or then they will get the content. Something that I do with people that I date is I don't tell them that I'm like a content creator straight up.
I need to start doing that too.
I wait, because they just get weird about it.
They get weird.
But there was this guy who I'd gone on like a few dates with last year, and I still hadn't told him yet. I was like, oh, I work in marketing. Very vague. I'm a freelancer. Like that's what I say. But because he had me as a contact in his phone, my content started getting served to him. So I'm like, if I
does that happen?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Like on TikTok, like you may know this person. They're in your contacts list. Or, you know,
That
I
feels
had
invasive.
some sponsored content that the brand like boosted. So he kept getting served the ad once he had me saved as a contact.
Right.
So if that happens and it's a video of me talking about some like date that I went on with the dude and he's just randomly served the content, he doesn't even know that I do that.
So he didn't get you didn't give him your Instagram?
No.
Interesting.
But he found it because it was served to him.
I think maybe that's what I'm going to try that next because so I'm on Raya, but my Instagram is linked to Raya. So I'm on Raya and I was on a few other ones, but it was too like overwhelming. My Instagram's linked to it. So it's like it's almost like these guys are seeing the image, social media portrayed image before even getting to know me.
Exactly.
Which is
they take it and they run with it.
They take it and then they already have their mind made up probably before getting to know you.
I also find that they get really intimidated if you maybe have a certain amount of followers or you have a certain amount of visibility. They get very like intimidated by that very quickly. They either assume that your DMs are full of, you know, a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
Or that you're going to start talking about them, which is like their biggest fear.
Right.
They just get so weird about it. So that's why I wait.
Which, I mean, I feel like if you start that's why I almost feel like I do need to disclose it though, because I do have a podcast where dating is a big element to it.
True.
You're going to remain anonymous, but until you're not.
Yeah. Until people figure it out.
Yeah. But if you can't stand the heat, then you got to get out of the kitchen. So maybe, I do need to tell people that I have a podcast that includes dating, and I usually do. And for the most part, everybody's been okay with it. There hasn't been anybody that's like, I want to remain completely anonymous. The last guy I dated actually came to me because he wanted to make a podcast about dating. So that the way that all went down was kind of wild because it turns out he actually wanted to be anonymous. I don't think people really know what they want until like shit hits the fan the way they didn't want it to. And then it's like, yeah. But, you know, we're all learning. We're learning as long as we can be kind and understanding and realize that, like, there's going to be more no's than yeses in dating, right? So we have to be willing to take that rejection or pivot or just be like, you know, this isn't working out. We're not for everybody. If we were, then it wouldn't be special when you did find the one, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So back to your balanced life, because we need more of that around here. Tell me, what's like your number one, or give me like your top 3 tools for keeping a balanced life.
Okay, the first one is going to sound so annoying.
Okay. Don't
like,
tell me journal.
Tomato. No, I do love to journal, but I wouldn't say that that's the foundation. I would say like exercise is the foundation.
Really?
Which I know people are like, boo, tomato. And I don't mean that in necessarily like a gym bro-y way. I just mean spending more time moving than not, whether that's walking, whether that's working out or taking a class. Just moving the energy around, I think is so important. But I also really credit exercise with me being a podcaster, with me being an entrepreneur, with me moving across the country.
Really?
I would have never had the courage to take those risks if I didn't believe in myself. And I learned how to believe in myself through working out.
Right. Interesting. I feel that. There's different ways people get their confidence, but exercise, I think, definitely can be one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else?
Okay. So exercising, I would say reading.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, do you have to actually put like eyes to words, or can you listen?
So people like to listen. I like to physically read a book,
Okay.
but if people are audiobook people, that totally works. However you get it.
I wonder if there's a difference though.
I think it just depends on your brain. I mean, I think some people are more auditory learners. I'm a more visual person. I also like to physically read because then I'm not on my phone. I find if I have an audiobook or even like sometimes watching TV, I'll still end up on my phone.
Totally.
Versus if I have a book, like I'll just read the book.
Yeah. Because your hands are doing something.
Exactly.
It's like we need to be knitting or something if we have an audiobook.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. But I find that reading, whether it's like self-help or finance or even romance, my audience knows that I love romance novels. I just love getting lost in a story. I love hearing other people's perspectives. And I think that it has made me a much more open, empathetic, less judgmental person than I used to be.
That. You've inspired me. Because when I read nonfiction. I read a lot of spirituality books, self-helpy books, how to biohack your life, how to have a certain type of wellness routine or body, something like that. But I never read anything that's about something that's not real life, which I think maybe I need to get into.
The trick is, because I love those books too, do those like in the morning. If you have a morning routine or whatever, you're primed to learn, you're trying to be productive, do that. And then at night, you do the fiction where you can kind of turn your brain off and get lost in a story. And it's just a little bit more fun. I find that that's a good balance.
Okay. I like that. I'm going to try it. And then I don't need to have my phone around me. I can put it somewhere, try to lose it somewhere.
Yeah.
I feel like subconsciously I try to lose my phone on myself all the time. It's like my body and my brain know that it's not good for me, so I can never find it. Without even thinking, I'll just like throw it somewhere. And then I'm like, I can't find it later. It's like something inside of me was trying to get rid of it. I don't know. Okay, so that's 2. Exercise, reading. What's your third?
The third, okay, this is going to be very different from what it would have been a few years ago. Because a few years ago, I probably would have said journaling. And I do still like journaling, but at this point, it's like brushing my teeth. Like it's automatic.
Okay.
Now, I would say it's finding some way to push myself outside of my comfort zone more often than not. So whether that is going to events or initiating conversations with people, because I'm very introverted. So being more social and talkative is like a stretch for me. But finding a way to stretch myself and do something that makes me feel uncomfortable more often than not is another big one.
Interesting. How do you keep tabs on that? How do you make sure you're doing it? Do you like check it off every day?
I don't, because I'm not that structured of a person.
Yeah. Same.
But I just try to just regularly. It's like, what am I saying yes to? Am I saying yes to something maybe like once a week that, pushes me a little bit?
Right.
Am I going to like one event by myself each week and aiming to strike up a conversation with one new person? Like that pushes me, but it's not so crazy.
Right. I love that. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm learning that I'm a little bit more introverted as well. But I don't know if stretching myself would be like going to somebody and trying to start a conversation or going to an event. I feel like that comes a little bit easier to me. But I guess finding a way that I would be stretched might be a place to start because I'm not even sure a lot of people know how they need to be stretched,
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is any small change you can make outside of your regular routine. If you go on a daily walk, like go on a walk on another route, or if you buy the same things at the grocery store every week, like buy one new ingredient and challenge yourself to figure out what to do with it. Like any little tweak we can make from the usual, I think is really helpful.
That's interesting. It reminds me of yoga when we do a pose that looks like this, and then they'll be like, okay, now do it the uncomfortable way with your hand, and they'll have you hold your hand the other way. And just that little switch is just so uncomfortable. It can totally throw you off. It makes you realize just how accustomed we are to having things a very certain way. Like when you hold someone's hand and then they go and switch it and it feels goofy, it doesn't feel like the right way. Yeah, it's good for our brain to be thrown off a little bit. It's kind of like how our bodies, they need extreme temperatures. Like that's why this whole cold plunge thing is taking off. And air conditioning is really not good for our bodies because we're meant to be like kind of hot sometimes, kind of cold sometimes. And, we're not meant to be perfectly comfortable all the time. Then we just kind of become stagnant beings.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so what advice would you give to somebody who is an aspiring podcaster?
Okay, I'll give you the quick origin story of my podcast.
Yes, please do.
So I started podcasting in 2018. It was fall of 2018. At the time, I was working as a social media manager at a startup. Oh. It was horrible.
Really?
It was so traumatizing.
I bet.
Did a lot of therapy from that job. 2018, yeah. It was
a traumatizing year for me too. I had a baby.
2018 was like a really rough year, actually.
It was it was amazing. I became a mother, but it was,
it's just a lot. It throws you off. And I was sitting at work one day and I literally just had the idea to start the podcast. It was literally like, start a podcast, name it Balanced Black Girl. That was the idea that popped into my head. And I went on Amazon and I ordered a microphone and I spent the next 10 days Googling everything that I could about podcasting and building my website. And the podcast launched a week later, and I just jumped in and I just did it, and it was bad, and I didn't know what I was doing, and it was really clunky, and I just kept doing it until it got better.
What number episode are you on?
Now, like 244
Okay.
is what we came out with today.
Wow.
And for a while, I was doing every other week, or I would take breaks and stuff, but pretty consistently ever since then. And so I think for people, when they're wanting to start a podcast, they overthink it and they think, well, I don't know how to do it. Well, I don't have the skills. Well, I don't have the right mic. You're not going to know until you do it. So you just have to start from where you are and continue until you get better.
And you just recorded it on some voice notes? Or
yeah, I did GarageBand on my old MacBook at the time.
And did you know how to use GarageBand because of some of your other jobs?
No.
Or no, you just started?
Learned it. Yeah. I just Googled some tutorials. Yeah. Real YouTube University.
And you were getting a paycheck from your job.
Yeah.
So you didn't feel like this needs to make money or
No. Yeah. So it purely started off as a hobby.
Yeah.
And it grew from there.
And did you feel that the world needed a Black woman's voice to talk about how to live a balanced life?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, and what inspired it was I'd been very interested in wellness from the time I was in college, and I had started getting into listening to podcasts pretty early on, like early to mid 2010s, and a lot of them were the very bro-y, biohacky, white dudes talking about wellness. Exactly. And while some of that content was good, I found myself having to do a lot of mental gymnastics to make it apply to me. Like, okay, how do I apply this if I have a period, or if I'm dealing with this, or if I'm dealing with that? Like, it's a little bit different. So I could never find wellness content that was directly applicable to my life. So I was like, okay, if I feel that way, other people probably feel that way too. So why don't I try to source some wellness experts who can speak to more of the things that we're experiencing as women and as women of color, because there's nuances everywhere. So I need someone to speak to that nuance, because no one was doing it at the time.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I started getting into podcasting because also I was into biohacking and mostly wellness stuff as well. But a lot of the research that I was learning about was things like fasting and things that really need to be different for a woman.
Exactly.
Like balancing hormones. Actually, the person that I'm interviewing right after you she talks all about our hormones and the 4 cycles of a woman's menstrual cycle that I never knew about. I never knew that when you take birth control, it just shuts it all down. Right? Do you talk about hormones at all on your podcast?
I have, yeah. But I also feel like it's been recent years that people have talked more about that stuff. I feel like growing up, you learn that you get a period and it's like you're either on your period or you're not.
Yeah.
But no one ever told us everything that happens in between. No, every week you're actually a different person. Every single week.
Literally.
And I didn't really learn that till I was 30. I mean, it's been very recent.
Yeah. I know. I feel like 1 out of every 2 girls was on birth control.
Right.
Or if you were having sex, you were on birth control. Like the pill birth control. So not like a condom, which also is an option. Yeah, it's wild, but at least I'm really happy to see that there's more women now coming out with podcasts and women who represent different demographics that can kind of streamline this information and make it apply to more demographic, not just men. I know I'm benefiting from it a lot, and I'm trying to learn about my cycle, which is actually pretty exciting. It gives you the power back a little bit. We're such complex beings, and there's so much more to us than I think we've been led to believe, especially around our hormones and our cycles. Okay, what's your favorite resource and inspiration? Is there anything you go to when you're feeling like in a rut with your podcast, or you just need some inspiration for your work or for your life?
I wouldn't say that I have a specific resource that I go to or another specific piece of content, but I feel like whenever I'm in a rut, I quite literally need to touch grass. So that's when I'm like, I need to spend more time outside. I need to spend less time on my phone. I need to spend time with friends. I need to go to a museum, pick up a new book, go try a new activity.
Yeah.
I just feel like living more helps me get out of ruts and inspires me a lot.
I like the feet on the grass thing, because I do feel like there is that, truly the grounding of just having your feet connecting with the earth. I was just in Rhode Island for the last couple weeks, and there's just something to it there. My parents have a farm, and you definitely you feel more connected to everything, and it kind of puts you in your place. I feel like in LA and sometimes in New York too, and in social media, we can lose sight of just how kind of insignificant but significant we are. We're so interconnected to everything, but also oh man, people take themselves so seriously sometimes. Like, especially in our world, it's like, you're not that important, bro. I don't know. That's something I've been dealing with this week as well.
It's true. And it's also an echo chamber where when you start consuming more and then all of a sudden you're kind of regurgitating other people's thoughts and you think you came up with it, but really you heard someone else talk about it, on their podcast 2 weeks ago, but you forgot that that's where you got it from. So you think that's what you think.
Yeah.
When that's not necessarily the case.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So going back to nature, I love that. I love that. I like to do that for myself as well. It must be hard for you here in New York, though. Is there a place where you can put your feet on grass?
Lots of parks. I've become a park
Central
girly.
Park, I guess.
Yeah. There's
know.
parks everywhere, and that's great. And it does help that it's summer right now. During the winter, it was hard. It was I hadn't experienced winter in a while because I'd been in LA for a few years.
Where'd you grow up?
Seattle.
Okay.
So getting back to seasons has been fun, but winter is,
it's a long one.
It is.
I grew up in the Northeast, so I know it well. I kind of like the monotony of the weather in LA, I'm not going to lie. It's nice to come for like short visits, I think. Although I think I told you before we were on air that I would have loved to live in New York, but now that I have kids, I'm like, it's probably just never going to be in the cards for me. But it's such an exciting place to live. I'm sure if you can go to a park and ground yourself that way, then that's all you need from the nature here. Okay, let's talk about how do you pick your guests for your podcast? Is there like a certain type of a guest that you usually go for?
It's varied. In the past, when I first started podcasting, I invited on a lot of people that I was friends with. And a lot of that was because one, it's like people don't want to guest on a podcast that nobody listens to yet.
Yeah.
Whenever you start a podcast, like no one really listens in the beginning.
Right.
But your friends were nice enough to say yes.
Yeah.
Two, I didn't know how to interview people. So I felt a lot more comfortable talking to people I already knew and building the skill and practicing with them versus people that I didn't know. And then once I built the muscle of interviewing, then I would look and say, okay, what topic do I want to cover? And how can I find the right either expert or person who has a perspective to speak on this? And that's still kind of the strategy that I use where it's like, okay, I would love to do an episode about hormones, or I would love to do an episode about skincare, or, an episode about morning routines or whatever. And then I'll seek out like experts or people who I just think have really interesting things to say or an interesting story related to that topic.
Yeah. Same. I think it's usually kind of a selfish pursuit, as like the best are, right? Because if you're passionate about it, then other people can feel that energy. But usually it's like something that we're interested in, then we find somebody and hopefully they agree. I've been getting more and more questions from people who want to start a podcast. And I remember when I first started my podcast, there's always nasty comments, but a lot of them were like, oh, because we don't already have enough, or like, just because it's like so saturated. But I find that it's people who are afraid. There's always room at the top. Like, sure, there's going to be a ton of podcasts, but if you look at somebody like Joe Rogan, has a very successful, I think the number one podcast in the country, or at least one of them. He says he didn't even start getting like good at it until I think a few hundred episodes in. So you got to be willing to be a beginner, right?
Yeah.
And fall. And then the right guests, I think, also just kind of serendipitously match with you.
Well, and I don't think podcasting is as saturated as people say it is.
Really?
Because most podcasts don't make it past episode 6.
Really?
A lot of people start podcasts, but they don't make it past 6 to 10 episodes because people realize how much work it is and then they abandon it.
Or they hate listening to their own voice.
Same. That's why I don't listen to my own voice.
I never listen to the back. I'm like, the editors
I'm like,
are like,
I know what we said.
Yeah, I'm like, that's fine. No notes.
Yeah. But yeah, podcasting isn't as saturated as people think because a lot of people start them, but they don't finish them. They don't follow through. They don't, continue on. So I think that there's still plenty of room for people who want to start.
Yeah. Good. Well, I like that. I think that's uplifting for our listeners. Okay. Well, if there's one thing you want to leave our listeners with, and that's, people who want to start their own podcast, maybe start their own entrepreneurial adventure, what's something that you would leave them with? What's a good place to start?
I would say that it's never too late to do what you want to do. And it's something that I've been thinking about a lot as I enter my mid-30s, which I've been in an existential crisis about, but I'm learning to chill more about.
How old are you? Because you look 25.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I'm about to turn 35.
Okay. So we're the same age. Well, I'm a little older than you. I'm 35.
Yeah, we're the same age. I'll be 35 next month. And I, for a long time, felt like this existential, like, oh my God, I'm in my mid-30s. My life is over. I'm all of these things.
Yeah.
And now I'm realizing that it's actually just beginning.
Yeah.
And that it's really never too late to do the things that you want to do. And it may not be easy, and you may have to take some unconventional paths to get there. You may have to make some sacrifices or some tough choices to do it. But the time is going to pass anyway. So let the time pass with you working towards what you want.
Yeah. Baby steps, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I think if we think about how hard or how much needs to get done to get to that destination, it doesn't serve you. I like to do what's the next right thing that I'm supposed to be doing? What's the next better choice?
Right.
And it's like one foot in front of the other. Otherwise, I will get so overwhelmed.
It's so overwhelming.
I couldn't have thought that I would ever have a podcast on my own. I started one with my friend, and then organically she kind of dropped off, wanted to go in another direction, and then I was left with this show. It's like there's so many ways that you can end up somewhere, and think if I had just thought like, oh, I want my own show by myself and not let it unfold organically, I never would have gotten there, right? Yeah, it's so interesting when you think back. And then you think about the oh my gosh, you know, I went to law school, and then I went and I got my master's degree in teaching, and I was a teacher, and then I was a behavior analyst after that. And I spent hours and hours studying these things and taking the tests and doing the board exams. And it's like, and then I ended up changing my mind anyway. So it's like you can spend so much time doing all the right things, and like anything can change. So it doesn't really matter.
No.
You know?
And I think also a lot of like younger people get so caught up on doing these things by age 30 because everyone mentally feels like there's this big cliff that you fall off when you turn 30, which is not real.
Yeah.
But I also think about even the work that we do, we wouldn't have been able to do that when we were like 22 because it didn't exist yet.
Right.
So are we not going to do the work that we do now because we weren't doing it 10 years ago? Because actually 10 years ago, like this line of work didn't really exist.
Yeah.
No, we're still doing it because
I know.
that's what we want to do. And so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And there's always going to be people who are first in line to be like, who are you? You're not qualified, or there's too many, or, you know, you're not good. And then they'll be there on your first and your second and your third episode when they all suck and they're like, see, I told you. But you're going to get the last laugh.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm also learning is like nobody more successful than you is going to make fun of you for putting yourself out there because they know what it's like to put themselves out there. It's always the people who are too afraid to put themselves out there themselves, or who don't have anything better to do, or don't have a lot going on, who have the most to say.
Yeah.
So it's like, who cares what they think?
It's so true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. I feel so inspired and uplifted.
Oh, good.
And where can we find you?
Yes, you can listen to Balanced Black Girl every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts, also on your media, wherever. YouTube. I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Balance Less. So you can find me there.
So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.